Hey, what's going on, college football fans? We're here for another episode of the Swampy Coliseum. That's Nathaniel Gilmore in the comfy confines of his car. And I am Andrew Hudson, and a very happy Andrew Hudson, to be frank with you, as we've got football to talk about. But first, we can't go any further without discussing my Florida Gators. Oh, potentially ending some playoff hopes for a second week in a row as Florida defeats Ole Miss 24 to 17. Oh, it looked like such an electric atmosphere there at the Swamp. Man, we've talked about this team a lot over the year. Our discussion has changed
Oh yeah,
drastically from
yeah,
beginning of the year to now. And starting with the head coach, of course, Billy Napier securing himself. But so many things to talk about from this game. One, I don't know that I've seen a bigger change in one side of the ball than the defense at the beginning of this year compared to now. I mean, this is a defense that gave up 600 yards of offense to Miami. We couldn't stop anyone to start the year. It was going just off of what was happening last year. And now we're holding Ole Miss to 17 points. We're forcing three turnovers. We're getting sack after sack after sack. I mean, they're playing lights out. And wow, it's such a change from what started at the beginning of the year. I've heard a few things, maybe the players talking to coaches about needing to simplify what's happening, the emergence of DJ Lagway. He does not go on the field on defense, but I think his presence alone changes things in the team as a whole. So, man, came away with his victory against a number nine ranked Ole Miss team who had the playoffs dead in their sights.
yeah,
Jackson Dart
right
had
there.
Jackson Dart costly interceptions, including one to close out the game. They couldn't get a running game going outside of him running and making some plays. But DJ Lagway just nothing crazy, but getting the job done. Our running game, Montrell Johnson was able to go for over 100 yards, making big plays in offense, but really it was the defense. Bryce Thornton with 14 tackles, Caleb Banks 2.5 sacks, Tyreek Sapp 1.5 on his own. All the tackles for loss, the sacks, the interceptions, the muff punt obviously was huge for us to recover. So it it, it was crazy. I was hoping for a close game, something to be able to say at least we had a chance. But man, everything is just changing with the thoughts on our team. To now, all of our hope goes to next year. All of our hope is what could we be with Lagway? What could we be with these new recruits who are coming in because of Lagway, because of these victories? If you haven't seen the recruiting trail, Florida is blowing up with
Yeah,
people swapping from FSU, coming to Florida. We had our guy coming from USC, now going to Florida. Numerous players are swapping to come to play in Gainesville. And what does that mean for our future? I mean, our hope is on playoff potential next year. Which, if you told me that 8 weeks ago, I would laugh you out of the room. But that's what we're looking at right now, and you can tell the joy in my face when I'm speaking, can't you, Nathaniel?
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. It's infectious.
Well, I mean, you saw what was going on a bit on Saturday. What do you see from this Gator team?
I mean, I think it's one where the beginning of the year. I mean, it's what year three of Billy Napier, but
Yeah.
the beginning of the year just felt like everything was in place. It's just you needed a culture to just click. And I think that bye week at the beginning of like what week 5 or 6 or when it was kind of early in the season, that's kind of when it clicked for this team. That's when that defense started getting going. Yeah, it's just I think it was a time to reflect and they didn't like where they're at And I think that's Billy Napier doing what he's getting paid to do, to rally the guys, see what's wrong, get them going. And since that bye week, they have been lights out. Their defense has been nasty. The offense with Lagway has been like so different than even when Lagway was playing against Miami, when Lagway was playing, in the first couple weeks. It's just
Right.
night and day, which is insane. Like if you told me Lagway would struggle kind of the first couple games, then Graham Mertz would get hurt, this is not what you would think would happen.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, the tide has just turned from that. The addition of our uh, defensive specialist and now kind of assistant head coach to come in has turned things around. And if that can continue on to next year, man, things are sky high. And expecting a win over Florida State this week. They've obviously been one of the worst teams in college football this year, so uh, we believe we have a strong chance to win that game, carrying us to a 7-5 record into a bowl game, which means extra practice, getting everyone,
Yeah.
all of our young guys en route
Hmm.
for next season just to get things started. So exciting, exciting stuff for us. And on the flip side, another 6-5 team, USC, scrapped out a tough win against UCLA 19-13 as well. Man, what'd you see there?
That was one of the weirdest games to watch. I just like I don't know. Like as obviously it's a rivalry game, so tensions are heated. It's super chippy. Like UCLA had so many, I guess both teams, but UCLA had like five more, personal fouls, unsportsmanlike than we did, and it was just back and forth. They're just heated. We had Cal Ford who transferred from USC to UCLA, didn't get time at UCLA, transferred back and said I'm tripping, and he was a part of it. There were just so many guys, it's a crosstown rivalry. That's what's going to happen. You have a bunch of guys that wanted to go to USC that's at UCLA. And then you have, just the fights and they all know each other. And yeah, it was chippy and it was tough. And then USC just decided not to know how to score in the red zone. We had this was just brain numbing because we had so many opportunities, like getting the ball at the 50. We started off the half pretty much. They had to kick off from like their own 5 yard line because of all the, personal fouls from
Mm.
the end of the first half. Like after the last play, they had like three and they kicked it from the 5. We get it to the 50. And I don't even know if we score that drive, but we had three three red zone trips in the first half, and we had three field goals, which not even red zone. They're inside the 10 almost every single time. And we get down there, we decide not to run it with, I think Woody Marks has the second or third most rushing yards in the Big Ten or something like that. He reliable, get it to him. His first 1,000-yard season, which shout out to him. He's been our best offensive player. We get inside the red zone, we run it once, get stuffed, and we just start throwing fade balls. I think we had, out of those three trips inside the 10, I think we had a total of 7 fade balls
Mm.
and 2 rushes, which is ridiculous. And it's tough, especially, you're touting Lincoln Riley as an offensive genius, and then you're sitting there like, these are low percentage throws, like why are we continuing to throw them? But I mean, second half, the defense turned it on. I think the biggest thing, offense is whatever. I think Lincoln Riley will figure it out. Maybe he's going vanilla for the Notre Dame game next week, but the defense is just amazing. I mean, just like how you're kind of saying, the difference from the beginning of the year and last year to now, the
Right.
defense from last year, 130th to 32nd in the country. And I mean, Danton Lynn's getting Broyle. He's a Broyles, finalist. And I mean, he's done such a great job. I mean, I think he's been, instrumental in getting a lot of, transfer guys. We have a big shot at Madden Framo, which he's going between Notre Dame and USC. and he's going to the USC Notre Dame game. So that's going to be
Mm.
interesting how that goes. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, but the defense has been lights out recently. Eddie Chaplitsky, which is our punter, Ray Guy finalist, and he's probably been the best player on our team. Honestly, he flips the field so well. I've never seen a punter like that since Tom Malone in 2004, 2005. Just apparently, if you want a good team, you get yourself a good kicker, a good punter, and everything will figure itself out. But yeah, we have Notre Dame next week, and man, that's a tough game. It's a team that's on fire, but they haven't played a team with as much talent as we have yet. So we'll see how that goes. I think if we are able to contain the run, which we did against Penn State pretty well, if we're able to contain the run, make sure Riley Leonard doesn't get loose and make him throw, I think we have a really good shot at beating them because we just have to figure some way to score against their defense, which with Jaden Mayava, we'll see with the explosiveness. We couldn't really do anything last game, against UCLA explosiveness wise. I think one of the only explosive plays we had was a double pass from Makai Lemon to Kyron Hudson, which just changed the magnitude of the game. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I wanted to lead. I told you about this earlier, but I want to leave with
Hmm.
this stat. There have been six teams in college football that have led in the fourth quarter in every single game they've played at
Mm.
like any point in time. USC is one of them,
Wow.
and they have 5 losses. The
Oof.
other 5 teams have 5 losses combined, with one of them
Wow.
being Oregon. So we have
Oof.
4 or 3 1-loss teams, 1 2-loss team, an undefeated team, and then USC with 5 losses. So
Wow.
yeah,
Having a
that's
chance at
what.
the end, but not being able to pull it off.
Yeah. So I mean, that's where you're talking about hope. That's where you kind of get hope. But then you go and look at Nebraska, who's been having the same luck in one-score games for the past 3 years. So we'll see. I think the recruiting's getting better. We're getting a lot of in-state guys. And like you said, we're bowl eligible. That means we get all those bowl practices with all these young players. And we're going to develop. We have some dogs at defensive end with Cam Fountain. Braylon Shelby's been great. So just more time for them to develop.
Yeah, that's good. You won me over with your punting comment. I think I heard over this weekend that Florida's punter, Jeremy Crawshaw, is the leader in active punt yards in college
Oh,
football,
wow.
which says one thing about Florida's punting. Um, it might be punting average, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's been there for 5 years, so he's had a lot of opportunities. But with that, let's move on to our other games from this week because we had some shockers. We had some wild games. But let's start off with the biggest game of the week, which was the top five matchup of number five Indiana traveling to play in the horseshoe against number two Ohio State. And Ohio State just ran them out the building. They
Yeah.
or had a 7 point lead to start in the first quarter, but other than that, Ohio State turned it on, ended up winning 38-15, and Indiana really looked outclassed. The only question is what impact will that have in the playoff?
Yeah. I think the beginning of the game, Indiana really showed. I think that first half, they showed that they can hang with Ohio State. And that second half was more of you can tell Ohio State had more depth. They had
Mm,
they had just guys after guys, and obviously, recruiting at this level for however long. They have so much more depth than Indiana. It's insane. And
mm,
it should have been 31-15. Ohio State, Indiana gave them the game. They're like, hey, kneel the ball. We're not going to call timeout. And they're like, yeah, let's just try to get it in the end zone. And they ended up
mm.
scoring at the very end. So that makes it look a little worse than it was, but still more of, that second half was just a blowout. I mean, Ohio State, they showed their depth. Will Howard really showed up in the passing game mostly.
Yeah.
He didn't really have a great time running it, which continues to shock me because that's, you think of Will Howard as a little more of a Riley Leonard type guy where he's going to put his head down and he's going to run some guys over. But he had a good game throwing the ball. I think Chip Kelly really has that offense working pretty well. But I mean, I think Indiana, it just showed the depth issues. They I they're probably going to make the playoffs. I mean, they just need to win. I think if they win next week,
Right.
they're in.
Taking
So
on Purdue
they'll
should be
have
no
another
problem
shot.
either.
Yeah, yeah, we say that, and then we see what's been happening the last couple of weeks. We keep saying, "Oh, Alabama should beat Oklahoma,"
Oh boy.
but
Yikes.
yeah,
Well, with that, we had other matchups throughout the week. Texas had a fairly easy win. Penn State snuck out of Minnesota. I mean, squeaked their way out with a 1 point victory. That would have thrown everything into question. Notre Dame w did what they should have done. They destroyed Army. Army didn't have a chance. Miami, again, they were kind of slow, but 22 points in the fourth quarter, they turned it on once again, which they've been accustomed to do. There were other top teams who had some blowouts throughout the week, but the big talker over the week were the blindside upsets. These
yeah,
games that we were not expecting at all. As you just mentioned, Oklahoma beats number 7 Alabama 24-3. We had
man,
Ole Miss obviously losing to Florida. There was then a game that wasn't crazy, but BYU loses again to Arizona State. Auburn beats Texas A&M in a crazy quadruple overtime game, and Kansas
that
beats
was
Colorado. I mean, all these games that we're seeing that we didn't even put into question at all. What did you take from any of these that you saw?
yeah. I'd even add Georgia. I mean, they didn't lose, but they struggled with Massachusetts. It was what 31-21 in the third, but I mean, obviously they went on to blow them out. But I think it's more of, with the NIL, the transfer portal, I think there's a little more parity. I mean, we talked about
Mm-hmm.
this a little earlier. You got teams like Georgia and Alabama, which they can't have, national championship rosters as their second team anymore. Like
Right.
there's a lot more depth issues across the league, and you're getting a lot of great players being able to be different places, get their playing time. And the Auburn game against Texas A&M, I mean, you just saw Marcel Reed. I mean, they came back. They were down big and they came back and they're about to just boat race Auburn. And then Auburn, is able to stick in there, get to overtime, and then you're at overtime and anything can happen. So I mean that shows a little bit of, I think, inexperience on Texas A&M's, you know, on their spot. And I think Elko, he's just getting into these big game environments. Nick Saban pretty much said that Jordan Hare is cursed, so there's that aspect too. I think the Kansas one, um, when Kansas beat Colorado, I think Coach Prime said it best. Colorado was just full of themselves. They thought they were going to beat everyone. They were on a roll, and you could tell. I mean, the energy wasn't there the whole time. The only time you could really they were clicking was after Shadur just got one of the dirtiest hits I've seen ever.
Mm.
Um, Kansas's linebacker goes for his knees and he gets flipped. Don't call a flag. And then Colorado goes down and scores. I think they scored, I think twice or like just really quickly. And you think, okay, that's game over. But then after that, the fire went out and they just lay down. So yeah, I mean, other than that, all of these, you could kind of see coming. If you really kind of watch the game, but it's it's a lot more parity, and that's I think great for the game, especially with the expansion of the playoffs.
Yeah, and with that, there are certainly some shakeups in the rankings, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I want to take a second to cover the Heisman race. because it seemed like the biggest three for the past few weeks have been Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, and Ashton Genty. So
Yeah.
Boise State sneaks away from Wyoming with a 4-point victory as well. He went off for 169 and a touchdown. Kind of a down game for him, honestly. But Travis Hunter and the Colorado Buffaloes have another loss. Cam Ward uh, had a nice win, but is still not looking as good since they had that loss a few weeks ago. So does that put Ashton Genty up in the look right now? He's at 2,000 yards on the season, over 20 touchdowns. I heard he's maybe scored more points himself than 4 or 5 FBS teams.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
insane.
he has 600 yards over the next leading rusher in college football, which is absolutely insane. But them being in the playoff conversation is what helps
Yeah.
them have this debate. If they weren't in this having this ability, then he wouldn't be there. But he's right up there with the other guys in the conversation. Who would you say is the leader right now?
I think, it's media that picks these guys, and I think the media's darling right now is Travis Hunter. I mean, he's he's a top 10 wide receiver and, cornerback in PFF. The stats might not be insane, but it's insane that he's doing both. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people making fun of us. Oh, he's winning it just because of snap count. I mean, this kid is doing stuff we haven't seen in a minute. Like, it was crazy when Adoree Jackson and Jabril Peppers were doing it in 2016. But
Mhm.
they were mostly defense, and then they were, gadget players on offense.
Yeah.
So just like this guy being probably their best offensive player and best defensive player is kind of
Yeah.
insane. But my heart is with Genty. I really hope he wins it. He's doing stuff that we haven't seen since Barry, the other Sanders. Um, and like, him comparing his stats with, other running backs that have won it, like, like Henry and stuff like that. Like he's way above them. Obviously, you can say strength of schedule, but he also doesn't have the offensive line or the talent around him like, those teams had in the past. And also Colorado, I think they're pretty much even, Colorado and Boise State, in strength of schedule. So
Mm.
that's a little negligible. And he dropped 200 yards, a couple touchdowns against Oregon, the number one team in the country. So I think I think if they make it into the playoffs, they win their conference. I think he wins it, especially with Colorado losing. But we'll have to see. I think it's kind of back and forth with a little lean towards Hunter right now.
Yeah, potentially. And the thing with Genty as well is that teams know that's who they've got to stop. They
Yeah, yeah,
they need to stop him from running the ball, and they can't do it. I mean, they've got Maddox Madsen, who gets the job done, but isn't anything special at the quarterback position at all. But they are just trudging along behind the shoulders of Ashton Genty. And looking at Travis Hunter, you were saying just this past week. I mean, he went for what, 8 and 125 and 2 touchdowns or something. He just
yeah.
has been playing so well. This year, I'm seeing he's got 82 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 11 receiving touchdowns. And he's got a
Wow.
rushing
Yeah,
touchdown along with it. And that's just the offensive side of things. That's not the defense. So with that, you have a bit of it's actually interesting that I think about it. We had 2 unanimous MVPs in baseball this year, Otani and Aaron
yeah,
Judge. And Travis Hunter is your Otani. He does it both ways. This year he didn't pitch, but typically he can pitch and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
hit. Travis Hunter
yeah,
is that he goes both ways and is one of the best in both in the nation. Then Ashton Genty is good at running the ball, just like Judge is with cranking those
yeah.
homers and hitting the ball. So
Exactly.
we're seeing that on both ends, and so it's like, who's your pick? Who do you prefer? And that'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see what the media says at the end of the season.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, but with that, we talked about the crazy upsets that happen. It's just leading us into an awesome final week of rivalry week of games in this last week of the regular season, which should be a lot of fun. But let's have that take us to our CFP bracket. So we'll talk about the
Hmm.
rankings in a minute, but the way the bracket looks right now, our first four games for the 5 through 12 seeds, we've got an SEC matchup of number 9 Tennessee against number 8 Georgia. Then number 12 Arizona State, who they're projecting to win the Big 12 here, playing against Ohio State. You've got a Big 10 game in Indiana versus Penn State. And then SMU, their projected 2 seed from the ACC, is playing against Notre Dame, leaving you with the top four seeds being Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Boise State. We talked about that last week. Boise State being ranked ahead of the Big 12 champions, so they get that first round bye. We've already seen from this week a lot of shakeup is still to happen. Like things aren't done changing. But
Yeah.
what do you see with the bracket at this point?
I mean, you really hope for, shake up because you have an SEC and a Big Ten matchup just straight away.
Right.
I think the whole point about this is, you're getting teams from different conferences to play each other. So I think, I think that will come into play. They kind of did that, when in the 14 playoffs when there's, multiple SEC teams that kind of staggered it, so they didn't play right away, but I think that's kind of the one thing that catches my eye. Obviously, it's crazy that the highest Big 12 team, they just are cannibalizing themselves.
Mm,
Arizona State sneaking in at 12 because they're ranked 16th. And then yeah, just like you're saying, Boise State. I think if they get a group of five, as a top four seed, and then you have a team like Ohio State, which they're a
hmm
five seed. And realistically, you look at that path that, Arizona State and, Boise State, that's a much easier path than the one seed. So
Right.
I think this year, maybe 1 or 2 years will be experimental and then seeing how they seed things. Yeah, you can definitely see people getting up in arms with, group of five teams being a top four seed with the bye, especially with other teams that you feel like deserve it. Whether you're a Texas, whether you're a Miami, Georgia.
Yeah, it is interesting you saying that because we would, in this situation, think Ohio State's a shoo-in for the national championship. Not
Yeah,
even a problem, is what we would assume.
yeah.
Whereas all the other games are interesting. I will say that with this setup, and hopefully it would remain this way, but this guarantees no interconference matchups in the final eight, which
Hmm.
I think is good
Yeah.
to see some interesting matchups there. But we've got these situations in the conference uh, championships that are going to be cool to see in the last week. Right now, we've got Miami uh, and SMU with those first two spots in the ACC as long as Miami wins. And I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
Miami has Syracuse this week,
Yeah, yeah. They
if
just
I'm
need
not
a
mistaken.
win, and they're in Clemson to get in. They need Miami to lose. I don't know what that tiebreaker is. I think yeah, it might be overall win percentage or something like that.
Well, in that game, if that's what we're looking at this year or this week now, yeah, they're playing Syracuse. You know, the only quarterback who has more passing yards than Cam Ward this year?
McCord.
That's Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord has been slinging it this season, but hey, he wasn't good enough for Ohio State, so let's move on from him. But other than that, the Big 12 has four 6-2 teams in the conference.
Insane. It's insane.
And then you've got Big Ten with Ohio State just needing a win over Michigan to make it in, Oregon to win their final game. Those two should be shoe-ins. from
Yeah, I
there.
think Oregon already mathematically, like they're in no matter what.
Yeah, they're definitely in. They're probably going to go in undefeated. It looks like then uh, Boise State, they're going to have to win that conference championship game, and we'll see
Yeah,
um, if it ends up being UNLV or Colorado State. They both have one loss in conference, and then the SEC, you know, with scary games this week for a lot of teams. Texas and Texas A&M are playing each other.
yeah,
Georgia is playing a scary Georgia Tech team who has already upset others this year. Tennessee taking on Vanderbilt, who we know can take down the biggest teams. Even dropping down farther, South Carolina is playing Clemson. I mean, these all the top five teams have a chance to lose this week, which means things could go crazy in the SEC. But
yeah,
yeah, we're
yeah.
looking at
Do
an
you think
interesting setup for sure. What are your thoughts?
yeah, do you think South Carolina is that out of all the three loss SEC teams, which one would you think deserves to get in? Like
Oh,
between A&M, like assuming they win out, A&M, South Carolina, Alabama.
man, I love this South Carolina team. Man, I see so much of Florida in them just with that coach only a few years in, true freshmen starting at quarterback, their defense just going crazy. They just and their losses are by just a few points. They
Yeah.
they would complain about refs losing them one of their games earlier this year. I mean,
Hmm.
South Carolina, with how they've been playing, especially recently, is one of the hottest teams in the country. So I would love
Yeah.
to see them in, but I think with just name recognition, they won't be put in over some of those other teams who are there. But with that, uh, and Ole Miss has three losses
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
Ole Miss too. Yeah. And Missouri.
I would
Don't
want
forget
to
about
put,
Missouri.
yeah, oh, I did. I would want to put, I would just love to see South Carolina some way shake their
Yeah.
way in, which they're sitting there right at 15 right now. So, who's to say? A win against Clemson this week
Yeah,
changes everything.
Clemson. Yeah, exactly. You're
Man,
you're boosted
wild.
at least above Alabama and Ole Miss at that point, I think.
Yeah,
Right.
you should be. You should be for sure. So, crazy matchups that are coming up. We'll talk a bit about the rankings and our picks coming up, but let's take a pause here. Let's reach our trivia question as Nathaniel's got one posed for me this week. You can play along with us. See what you know. We'll see what I know. What's our question this week, Nathaniel?
All right. So with this expanded playoffs, there's a lot of talk about teams getting their first shot in the playoffs. You got
Okay.
Arizona State, never been in the college football playoff. Boise State, never been. Um, so let's kind of take a rewind. This might be a little quick, but I thought it'd just be a fun exercise. Can you name the seven teams, so just seven of them, that
Okay.
have made it to the college football playoffs, but only have made it once?
Wow. Only made it once into the playoff. Yeah, I don't. Oof. Yeah, we're talking about those one-year wonders who have just popped
Yeah, we
in.
got some sneaky teams on here.
Yeah, that's interesting because with that, so we're talking, yeah, we're talking 14 playoff, and there's so many teams who have made it multiple times. And with that, like my first thought was Washington, but they've done it twice.
Yep,
Um,
yep,
they were
twice.
in one of the first ones,
Yeah,
and then
2016 and
obviously,
then last year.
yeah, and then last year. Um, Man, who's a team who's made it into the playoff just once? Oh, so many teams are in there every year, like Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama, and we had Clemson before, and Oklahoma made it a bunch of times. Uh, let me see. Have we had Michigan State make it
Yep.
in?
Yeah, Michigan State 2015 after they beat Iowa in the Big Ten championship with oh gosh, who was that running back? Not Jeremy
Wow.
Langford. Yeah, it was one of those
That's
bruiser running backs.
yeah, that
EJ
is
Scott, I
interesting.
think.
Whew. Michigan State, the first one
Yeah,
coming from there. Okay,
yeah,
there's
you got one.
that's one.
That was
Let me see.
probably
I
one of
feel
the hardest ones, though. So
yeah. Well, man, it's so tough to pick them out. Um, we've had we've have we had Oregon more than once?
Oregon has only been once with
Okay,
Marcus
Oregon.
Mariota. We
Yeah,
got
okay,
two.
back in 14, 15, yeah. Okay, Oregon, Michigan State. I mean, I gotta pull some SEC from here, huh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's an SEC team here.
Um, right around, did Auburn make it?
Auburn has not made a CFP.
Okay. They were in one of those last BCS games against
Yeah,
FSU.
yeah,
Um, then who was maybe LSU,
yep. The
just
only team on this
2019
list that has won the
that
entire thing.
won. Oh, okay.
All right, we got three.
Okay, we've got three now. Let's think back to Big Ten. Yeah, like in Iowa, Iowa State, we Iowa. We've got so many teams that uh this is tough.
You want a hint
How
or
about what
like
about Penn State?
Penn State has not made a college football playoff.
Mm, uh,
Yeah,
has
they've
Notre
never been
Dame?
able to.
Notre Dame?
But Notre Dame has made two,
Oh, of course they have.
18
Dang
and
you,
20.
Manti Te'o. Oh no, Manti Te'o was before then. He
Yeah,
was with
yeah.
he played against Johnny Manziel, or he was in the Johnny Manziel days. Um,
Yeah,
okay,
the
yeah,
Ian
give me something.
Book, Notre Dame. Okay, so here, let me give you a current. So yeah, current conference breakdown. Some of these teams
Okay,
weren't in this conference, but
sure,
yeah,
back then.
yeah. So we have a Big 12 school, we
Okay,
have an ACC school, we have and then we have an SEC, and then another Big 12. So we have two Big 12s, ACC and SEC.
okay, and this is current.
Current, yes.
Okay, with that, well, Miami hasn't. Clemson's done it multiple times. Um, man, you got FSU there. I mean, uh, I because they didn't make it last year.
Uh,
Um, man, but I don't know that they would have made it before then. I'm trying to think of who else would be there. Um, would it be FSU?
yeah. Jameis
Ooh,
Winston
Jameis?
against Oregon. And then he had the
Wow.
the play where he fumbled the ball in the air. Yeah, that was the
Wow.
first iteration.
Holy cow.
So we
Yeah,
got
okay.
4 out of 7.
So they won the one uh against Auburn, but they lost.
So the Auburn game was the year before, the championship the year before.
Right, yeah. So
Yeah.
they won that one in
Mhm.
BCS and then they lost the
Yeah, the next year.
CFP.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next year against Oregon.
So we got an ACC, we've got two Big 12 teams right now. So
Yeah.
we're thinking Kansas State.
Nope.
Okay, I was wondering if Colin Klein made his way in there. Um, uh, Kansas, we got Colorado, we got uh, ooh, Texas schools. Um, Jeez Louise. Um, SEC would have to be mm, not Texas.
Yep, Texas last
Yeah,
year, their first time.
Texas last year was their
All
first
right,
one.
two
So
more.
there's two Big 12s.
Two current Big 12 teams.
All right, give me states. Unless that like
Yeah, so we have, oh, okay, I'll give you one state because the other one would give it away right away.
okay.
One of the states is Texas.
Yeah, I figured. So then
I will say, so the last three you had,
oh
including
TCU,
Texas.
TCU,
Yeah,
TCU.
there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
There you go. All right.
That's right. 60 65-7? Is that what that score was?
They beat Michigan. They beat Michigan.
They did. They earned their way there. Um, okay, and then the last one I'm trying to get.
Yeah. Last one,
Uh,
they are a current Big 12 team. Might have not been one as of late.
wow.
They
Um,
they broke, I guess, broke a record. They broke a trend when they made it.
hmm, broke a trend. How?
They were the first blank team to make it.
Hmm, maybe of the conference they were in.
Quite possibly.
Uh, shoot, man. The first non-power five. Yes. Um, man, I could just think of Houston. Um,
Yeah, it was that era where Houston was good.
right. Oh boy. Um, their current Big 12. I'm struggling.
Okay, I'll give you some nasty hints here. The quarterback of that team, um, I think he's on Atlanta right now. Just hasn't been good at all. I don't know why he's been in the NFL this
Oh
long.
yeah,
Their
Cincy,
best player.
Cincinnati.
Yep, there you go.
Desmond Ritter. Man, it's amazing how those teams just like evaporate from my mind.
Just escape. Yeah.
And then when you mention it, I remember, I
Hmm.
remember watching TCU in Georgia in my living room. I remember
Yeah.
watching Cincinnati losing. Yeah, all those are right there, man.
I
Seven
can't
teams have
believe.
only made it once.
Yeah. Yeah. We have Alabama made it 8 times. Clemson made it
Oh,
6. Ohio State made it 5. Oklahoma made it 4. Georgia made it
wow.
3. Michigan 3. Notre Dame and Washington at 2.
Oh, man. Think about going to the playoffs 8 times in that
Insane.
span.
I mean,
That's
that's
disgusting.
that's pretty much every year. Yeah, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, 23.
Oh, and so many wins in that time period too.
Yeah.
Yikes. Well,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I'm
Good.
actually
Oh,
like
it's good.
really surprised you got Michigan State off bat. I like if I had betting odds, that would have been my top for you to get last.
Well, something just rings a bell for that. I'm trying to even think of what that would be. But yeah, I remember that being a thing and then beating Michigan and yeah, just kind of storybook stuff. We'll have to look back at that roster because I'm sure it's an interesting
Yeah.
roster
I
to
want
consider
to
back then.
it was the quarterback after Kirk Cousins.
Yeah,
It was I forgot his name. I'm pretty sure the running back was LJ Scott.
yeah, that makes sense. We'll have to look at it. But
Yeah.
man, good
Yeah.
stuff. Well, hey, let's talk a little bit of risers and fallers as we look at our CFP top 25. We went over a bit of the bracket, and I'll just give you the top 12 as the rankings sit right now. We've got Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State as our top four, followed by Notre Dame, Miami, Georgia, Tennessee, SMU, Indiana still there at number 10 after that Ohio State loss, and rounding it out, Boise State at 11 and Clemson at 12. So after this week, who would you say is your biggest riser, Nathaniel?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go with Arizona State. I mean, they had a big test with BYU. I mean, we know it's a BYU team that's tumbling down the rankings after being undefeated 2 weeks ago. But I mean, Arizona State, now they're the highest Big 12 school. I mean, Kenny Dillingham, that is a program. I mean, he is an Arizona State guy through and through, and you can tell, he wanted to be there. He just enjoys, the atmosphere. And I mean, what a funny way to end that game. But I mean, we got Cam Scattaboo, who stingers up Sacramento State. Just he's a dog, and I think he should be getting more recognition than he is. And I mean, this is a solid team. We have Levitt at quarterback, which makes plays when you need him to. But yeah, I mean, it's a good team, and I think I mean, they're probably in my mind they're going to be that Big 12 representative. I think the I think the game's probably going to be Arizona State, Iowa State, and just looking at those teams, I think Arizona State will be able to, overcome that and be, the rep.
Yeah, I like that, and it's interesting to see that situation there. A few weeks ago, we weren't talking anything about the Arizona State Sun Devils in this podcast. I mean, they were not mentioned at all for us. So to see this change and now a win against Arizona away to be there in the conference championship game is certainly interesting. For me, my my biggest riser right there next to him or right there near him, it is going to be Clemson. Clemson is a team that we had written off for a while earlier this year, and they've been able to jump their way back there into the playoff conversation. We didn't think that Cade Klubnik was going to be able to turn it around, and obviously they've got themselves looking like they're in a great position to be able to make it in the playoff. The only question is this matchup this week against South Carolina, who we're saying is one of the
Time.
hottest teams in the country right now. So they could very well be my biggest faller next week. But they, beat Pitt a couple weeks ago, had an easy win this week against the Citadel, and now they're right there in the conversation to make it into the playoff. And with that, got to go biggest faller as well. And this this is not that tough of a decision for me, but it's Alabama. Alabama coming off a how could you even question them losing to Oklahoma? That wasn't even a thought on the radar, but Jalen Milroe goes in and throws three interceptions. He has arguably the worst game of his career. They put up 3 points against this
Insane.
Oklahoma Sooners defense. 3 points. With all of their firepower, that's unacceptable. I don't know what happened to them with Kalen DeBoer going into this huge game because they're playing for their lives right here. So they're my biggest faller for sure. They still have an outside chance to make it in. They're playing against Auburn, who we just saw beat Texas A&M last week, so a huge matchup once again in the Iron Bowl to finish up the year. But Alabama, man, disgusting loss.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, technically they could have scored 10. And then one of the most egregious penalties I've ever seen in my life
Mm,
happened. I I don't, I've complained about penalties all year long. That was the worst I have ever
mm,
seen. But yeah, on to me. I think my biggest faller, I think I mentioned them as my biggest riser last week. Um, Colorado. I mean, they
mm.
had going in against Kansas. Granted, I knew Kansas was going to win. I kind of had them
You called
picked.
it.
I did. It's just the run game is nasty, and Colorado's run defense is just so so iffy, but I didn't expect their offense to disappear like that. I mean, they got infatuated with winning and everything it came with, and they went into that game against 4-6, Kansas team back against the wall, trying to get a third straight bowl game. And you have to know that they're coming in hot. And I think you saw them go in like they were playing an FCS school, which they would have won against an FCS school, but they just looked lifeless. They looked dead. The offense wasn't like, even when, Kansas is just running the ball the entire game. And, you know, Colorado's not getting a lot of touches. They're not able to touch the ball really. And when they do, it's just 3 and out. Maybe they go a little further and they fizzle out. And I think them losing, I didn't think it'd be the offense. But I mean, here it was a combination of the offense and the defense. I mean, the defense could have made more stops, but the offense didn't do them any favors by there would be 7 minute drives by Kansas. And then they'd go around 3 and out. And then another 7 minute drive where the defense is tired, worn out. But shout out to Kansas. Told you, Lance Leipold, rock chalk. But Colorado really, they had the playoffs right in front of them. I think if they won that game and they win out in the championship, they're in, and we get to see Shadur in the playoffs. But now they're on the
Mm-hmm.
outside looking in. I think they need pretty much BYU and Iowa State to both lose next week just for them to get a shot, and maybe even Kansas State.
Yeah, they're looking rough in their situation right now. There were a lot of choices we could have gone with. Of course, Ole Miss losing to Florida, dropping themselves there. Other teams who, Army, who going in undefeated, had a chance against Notre Dame and got blown out, ending their chances. So, yeah, a lot of choices there for our followers. And before we get to our picks for this week, I did my research. Here we go. We had Connor Cook, quarterback in that Michigan State team back in
Oh yeah, yeah.
2015. You're right. LJ Scott as a freshman, leading
Hmm.
running back on that team. Most other names I don't really know. They had Jack Conklin at tackle, anchoring things
Hmm.
down. And they had a little freshman on that team who didn't play until he transferred to Mississippi State the next year, named Montez Sweat on that Michigan State team.
No shot.
Who knew? Who knew? But yeah, they made it there in 2015. But with that, let's make our Swampy Coliseum picks for the week. We're into rivalry week. So some good matchups here. Really, four of our picks here are good rivalries that we all know and appreciate. And we're going to get into them because there are some playoff situations to consider. First one, let's start off with the game we've been discussing already. Number 15, South Carolina, is traveling to number 12, Clemson. Not a far drive. Hop on the bus, drive over to Clemson. Huge game here. Clemson's a 3-point favorite. Who do you have winning the game, Nathaniel?
I think I think I'm gonna go with Clemson. I mean, they have their backs against the wall. They have a lot more riding on this game than South Carolina. I think they have a more reasonable path at the playoffs, and I think this is a more experienced team, which I feel like we say every week, and then the more experienced team loses every time. But you have Dabo, who is on that list that we talked about of teams that have made the playoffs multiple times. You have a coach that's been here before. You have a team that is more knit together. You have a team that, they've been through some ups and downs, and this is that last shot. This is that time to prove everyone wrong, all that fun stuff. And they haven't been in the playoffs since what? Trevor Lawrence.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
I think it's time to snap back, and they're at home. Um and you've seen South Carolina go on lulls, and I think Clemson, if they stay consistent and get away from some of those lulls themselves, I think they can comfortably win this game.
Yeah, and playing at home makes a huge difference for that too. I am gonna stick Oh well, let's go ahead and reference last week as well. Great week for you. 4-1 week there, opposite for me, 1-4, bringing us to neck and neck now for the season overall. I'm 39-27. You are 38-28. Just a game really separating us. Last week, my downfall was going with my heart. I kept going with my heart. I kept getting burned over and over again. I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going with my heart still. And I'm picking South Carolina. And to the same point that you made, South Carolina is seeing themselves here at number 15 in the rankings, saying, wait a second here. We might have a shot at this. I was saying a few weeks ago, oh, you just wish for a team like South Carolina they could have a chance because they're one of the hottest teams right now. Well, maybe they do. Who knows with all the shaking up that's going to happen? Maybe they could sneak their way into that 12, 11 seed. Who knows? So I'm going to pick them rolling into Clemson and getting that victory. I like it. Our next one, another in-state rivalry. We got number 3 Texas traveling to number 20 Texas A&M. A&M who just came off that tough loss against Auburn. Texas is a 5-point favorite, and I'm picking them to win the game. You talked about people having experience there with Clemson, and with that, we've got Mike Elko in his first year at A&M. We've got Marcel Reed still getting the hang of things, and I think Texas is going to be able to come in there and beat them, even with the 12th man there in College Station. Texas knows what they have to do. There's even been chatter about them not making the playoff if they lose another game, which I don't know is necessarily true, but the talk is at least out there. So I'm picking Texas. Quinn Ewers is going to have a good game, but I think the Longhorns will be able to do it.
Yeah, you know what? I think Texas is the better team, more experienced team, but man, they've been looking shaky as of late. They've had some close games. I mean, what they just played, what Kentucky, and that game was a lot closer than it should have been. There's a lot of talk of their strength of schedule not being great and them losing to the only good team they've played all year, and they're going into Texas A&M in a
Hmm.
nasty rivalry, which hasn't they haven't played this game in a while, and I mean, I'm gonna bank on the chaos that has been happening in the SEC the last 2, 3 weeks, and I think
Yeah.
Texas A&M is gonna just pull off some wild upset. It's gonna be close, and I think yeah, they're gonna be able to take it at the end.
Yeah. I like that. Going opposite again. So with this one, we're going to the Big 12, and we've got number 24, Kansas State, at number 18, Iowa State. Two ranked teams here near the top of the Big 12 standings. Iowa State's a 2.5 point favorite. Who you got?
Yeah, this one's weird. I mean, we have two teams that are technically still have a shot at the Big 12 championship, even though they've just both been disappointing. I mean, technically, Iowa State, they've been, if you told them at the beginning of the year you're going to be 18 at this point with 2 losses, you're going to be like, Iowa State fans are going to be over the moon. They've been struggling the last couple of years, but seeing how it played out, where they go undefeated and then drop two pretty bad games to the only really competition they have on the schedule. Um, and then you have Kansas State, which let Will Howard walk for a young quarterback and in Avery Johnson, and they've disappointed this year. They've lost some games they shouldn't have. But I'm gonna go with Kansas State here. I think they just have more talent overall. I think, Matt Campbell's magic is running out this season. And once they play teams that just have a little bit more talent, they tend to fold. And I think, this isn't going to be any different.
Yeah, I agree with Kansas State in this game. This is a Kansas State team who remember that team who's knocked off Big 12 teams over the past couple weeks. Kansas, 2 weeks ago, Kansas State beat them 29-27. The week after, they knocked off Iowa State. So uh, they're coming in playing better after a couple tough losses. They beat Kansas. They just had a big win over West Virginia. I still believe in the playmaking ability of Avery Johnson, even though they've been disappointing over this year overall. But I'm picking Kansas State. I think they'll be able to come out with a victory and really shut down the hopes of Iowa State. Our next one is the Iron Bowl. As we mentioned before, Auburn is traveling to number 13, Alabama. Alabama is a 13.5 point favorite coming off of that drubbing they had against Oklahoma. But we've seen Alabama in this situation before, having a bad loss, turning around and going home and needing to come up in a big game. And I think they're going to do it again. They blew their opponent out last time that happened. I'm going with Alabama to beat Auburn, to pull out all the stops, whatever they have to do to make sure they finish the regular season 9-3 and beg and plead on their knees for a chance in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. I think I mean Auburn, they had a great win against Texas A&M, which I'm in my mind, I'm just contributing it to the Jordan Hare curse that Nick Saban seems to think is there. They're not at Jordan Hare. They're at Bryant Denny. They're going to Alabama. They have an offense that is prone to mistakes. And I mean, Alabama, despite their defensive flaws, they have been able to take advantage of mistakes. So I think Alabama's going to go in, they're going to reset, and just like you said, they're going to win this game, and they're going to show it as a top win, a top ranked win type thing, and just plead their case. But I think they win. It's really going to be. I think it's going to be close, but until the end, where I think Alabama's going to pull off a couple touchdowns to push the lead.
Yeah, agree on that one. And that leads us to our last game, close to your heart. We're going with one of the most historic matchups in college football history. Number 5, Notre Dame is traveling to USC, playing against your Trojans. Notre Dame 7.5 point favorite here. You've got the first pick. What do you think?
I think this one's tough. Historically, if you look at upsets, it tends to be on the other side where Notre Dame upsets USC. So
Mm.
history's not really on our side. There was that drubbing that Notre Dame gave us last year when we had a lot more competent offense. I think our team, ironically, is better this year than it was last year, even without Caleb Williams. But just as an overall team standpoint, we have better defense, better playmakers. It's just quarterback, of course, is kind of that question mark. I think it's tough. I mean, obviously, I have to go USC here. We need it for Madden for Amau. We need him. We need the linebacker, depth. And I think if we are to pull it off, like I was saying earlier, where it just the young kids, they just gotta shine. Cam Fountain's gotta just push that edge and keep Jeremiah Love inside. We have our boys Mason Cobb and EA just plugging up the holes in the middle, and our defensive linemen, while they can't get any push at all, just make sure the offensive line doesn't push them back, which they've been doing an excellent job all year. So just bend, don't break defense like we have all year.
Mhm.
Danton Lynn, show why you're the Broyles, award winner, and then Lincoln Riley, stop throwing fade balls at the goal line, and I think we have a solid chance to win. So I'm gonna go USC. I'll be wearing my USC gear on Saturday and just praying.
Those are some good ideas. For me in this one, I have gone against Notre Dame over and over and over and over and over again. And I keep being wrong every time. And I can't do it this time. I've got to pick Notre Dame. Even though they're traveling to USC, I know is starting to turn things around a bit with Jordan Mailata, but I'm going with Notre Dame. They've got to seal their way into this playoff and pull off the victory. And with that, we have a Thanksgiving week that we're looking forward to. I know my family's flying in tomorrow morning, which I'm excited about. So we'll have NFL on Thursday. We'll have college football on Saturday. We'll be hanging out and watching some good games together. What are your plans for this week?
Yeah, so I'm down in LA with family. So yeah, I mean, same thing. We'll watch a little bit of football. I mean, you're telling me you're not going to be watching the Memphis Tulane game on Thursday?
I'm telling you that it'll be available. It'll be available. If we need to flip it on, we can.
I mean, the Cowboys Giants. That's
Yeah, I want to see if DeVito can actually have a chance to play again. I heard he might not be playing this week.
yeah. They have Drew Lock, I think, is setting up for that game. So we'll see.
Well, an old Tiger faithful. Well, good. It'll be good to enjoy Thanksgiving, to have a great time watching football and talk more chaos next week.
Yeah,
Thanks
I'm
always.
excited.
Oh, it's so good. Thanks for tuning in to the Swampy Coliseum. That's Nathaniel Gilmore. I am Andrew Hudson. Remember, follow us on YouTube, on Spotify. You can listen. Follow us on Instagram to see our posts throughout the week. And we are looking forward to talking to you again next week. See you later.